Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine the show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from the audience at SmithWeekly, including Brent S., Mark R., at U308 Uranium, and Paul M. New guest on the podcast today, Mr. John DeJoia is with us. John is the director and geologist at Strathmore Plus Uranium. The company is focused on ISR uranium exploration in Wyoming, United States, with its agate, beaver rim, and night owl exploration projects. Strathmore Plus Uranium is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol SUU and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol SUUFF. John, thanks for coming on Smith Weekly Discussions. Welcome.
Well, it's good to talk with you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, John, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Well, why don't we kick it off here, just as customary for a new guest, with you talking about your background and experience for the audience who is listening in.
Well, it's a pretty long story. I sometimes bore people with it. Some people really like it, but I'm going to give you a somewhat abbreviated discussion because it spans over 50 years. I went to the University of Wyoming, graduated there. Uh, I had a friend of mine who stayed in Laramie. And one day I was working in an interim job, and he called and said, John, you thought about being a miner? And I said, well, of course I did. Anyway, he said, we have an opening. I called up the personnel director. He hired me over the phone in 1971. I couldn't really report to work till 72 because I had to quit the other job and I had to relocate back to where I went to school. So anyway, I took the job with Utah International. Utah International was part of the six partners that built Hoover Dam. A very long, proud history in the construction and mining industry. They were with Morrison Knudsen in the industry, another very proud historic mining company. Anyway, my first job was in the pit. I showed up on March 12th, went down to the or up to the mine, I should say. They pointed at an ore truck and said, "You ever drive one of those?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, here's how you do it." He said, "That's your office." And this is a 20-ton truck. Uh, I'm 23 years old. I got in the truck, went to the pit. The guy in the pit, the superintendent, said, "Here's a Geiger counter. When you go out there and you see this needle reach a certain level, you put a flag in the ground." Well, this was really good training, I'll tell you. But it was the basis for my development as a mine geologist. Obviously, I was a little green, but I found nobody in the pit knew anything about it. I found that ore got wasted, so to speak, was mined improperly. That, like I said, the workers knew nothing about it. Well, I did this for, I think 6 months. I surveyed, I did all kinds of things. Uh, and after 6 months, I was put on staff as a geologist. Still had to work in the pit every day, still had to survey, but I had a title and a professional job. I went from that job to helping, or at the same location, do the surveying, do the mine claim staking, the land work, and then we started working on an expansion. So I got to do design work. All of this tapping what I had learned in school over a long period of time. I did this for about 10 years, mined approximately 20 million pounds open pit in Shirley Basin. During this time interval, I also had the great opportunity, and probably the only person in the world that's had this, to excavate open pit through a previously solutioned mine area. In other words, ISR, we were the first company that did uranium in situ recovery in the world commercially. It was done in Shirley Basin before I got there. Anyway, I got to mine through this and see the actual effects on the ore with the solutions. I went from that job to chief geologist at Federal American Partners in the Gas Hills. I was chief geologist there. At that time, in the early 80s, the uranium industry was going downhill rapidly. We were shutting down. We evaluated the properties. Uh, we had a shaft in ore just off of Beaver Rim, about a 983-foot deep shaft. Got to go down in that shaft, see the ore, know what's just north of Beaver Rim. Anyway, I then became a director of technical services and assistant mine manager in that area. Went from that job to the UMTRA, uranium mill tailings remediation, and did it. I actually designed the project for the company I worked for. We didn't get the bid. However, Union Carbide got it, and I got on with Morrison Knudsen at that time to help run that operation of the tailings removal. Well, we finished that job successfully. Then I got into nuclear remediation and hazardous waste and mixed waste remediation. I went to a nuclear fuel reprocessing plant at Idaho National Engineering Lab. The plant was shut down by Department of Energy before it became operational. The cost overruns were horrid. The technology is there. I was still in the nuclear industry, which made me happy. Did this. I got transferred down to Los Alamos National Lab. Did a lot of nuclear remediation and mixed waste remediation and radioactive remediation. I was fortunate enough to decommission and decontaminate a nuclear reactor at Los Alamos National Lab. And believe me, that is an experience working at the lab and doing that type of remediation. From there, we started up Strathmore Minerals, the original Strathmore Minerals. I hired on with Dev and Dave, and we took on a partner with Sumitomo Corporation for the Roca Honda mine down in New Mexico. And I became the manager, the senior vice president and manager of Roca Honda Resources. Worked very closely with Sumitomo, and then the famous Fukushima disaster happened. Nature did what nature does, and had a tremendous impact on the entire world and the nuclear industry. It wasn't the engineering of the plants, it was Mother Nature. Anyway, we divested of all of that, and I retired. And about 2.5 years ago, Dev called me and asked me what I was doing. And he had the properties that we spun out, the Canadian properties in Peru. And I said, I'm just retired, Dev. And he said, no, you need to work again. So here I am.
John, long-winded and great. I really appreciate that one. Thank you.
Like I said, it takes a while to tell that story.
I think that helps give the audience a flavor here as to who you are and your character and your extensive experience within the sector, various different fronts, of course, the various technical expertise and experience that you carry. You and I think, can agree that experience is everything in this world and that you can get all the degrees you want, with exceptions on some things, but experience is where it really actually counts. And let me just come back here and get another flavor here from you, just a off the wall question for you, John. But tell us about your favorite beverage for any moment in the day, any time of day, any work task. Tell us what your favorite beverage would be.
My favorite beverage? Well, I used to think a tequila, Coke, and lime was pretty darn good, but I kind of outgrew that. when I started getting them automatically. I guess a nice coffee. And in the summer, an iced coffee.
Great. No, thank you. You gave us a couple of those, so I appreciate that. Always good to ask, and we're trying to ask them different questions of our guests, and of course keep the audience awake because they probably get tired of me asking the same
Well,
questions
I've never
often.
had that question.
So thank you for that. I want to also have you give, and you started to talk a little bit about some of the past history there, but maybe just consolidate this down for us here and just speak to just recent events, maybe over the last year or so, John. We can talk a lot more about the broad industry and, of course, uranium, but I just want to consolidate some of your thoughts on your current views of where we are today in the uranium market, what you're seeing out there, and then, of course, we'll jump into Strathmore Plus.
I guess I'd have to characterize it in one word, optimism. But then you have to expand on that. I've been optimistic through four uranium boom and bust cycles. But overall, we still need it. We still want it. And now the public, for the most part, is coming around to the fact that it is a green energy. It has a very small carbon footprint, and the potential uh, disturbances on the earth and the environmental impacts really are very minor. So, optimism.
Good to get your comments there on that, and lots of things happening, as you well know. Fuel cycle. Washington just recently decided to actually do some work a little bit here in uranium bans, of course, which will see the impacts of that flow out here over time. But it does remove uncertainty with respect to the market and utility uncertainty, and so they have a good idea on direction, and of course are lining up for waivers, as you can imagine. I would suspect here even today. So well, why don't we jump right into Strathmore Plus here? And I'd like to have you just quickly give us an overview of Strathmore Plus Uranium and the focus. And then, of course, we'll jump into a bunch of details and projects.
Well, when Dev first contacted me, he said, I want to, we spent like 37 million trying to permit the Roca Honda operation to no avail. We just finally gave up. And we were trying to permit a mill also. We had our draft environmental impact statement, but Dev's impetus was Wyoming because it's one of the best permitting environments, best public acceptance areas in the world, actually. I guess I'm going to go out on a limb. It's a good place to do our business. We also wanted to look at easily accessible ore bodies. And I say ore knowing that it has an implication of economics, but that's what we're really talking. We wouldn't be looking for ore bodies if it wasn't economic. So I am going to use that term occasionally. I know some people will pick on it because they don't start out as ore bodies. But anyway, we wanted the public to accept it. We wanted to be successful when we did find these quote ore bodies. And we wanted to be able to access the material, the mineralization with ISR mining. It's economic. It's, I guess you'd have to say, environmentally responsible, and we can monitor any excursions. The science is now there. When I first uncovered it, the science was not there. This was basically an experiment in the 1960s that actually worked, and they had a lot of excursions. There were a lot of negative results. Hence, we actually went in and recovered ore from the previously solution mined areas. So that was, we wanted to find mineralization. We wanted it to be accessible to ISR recovery, and we wanted a good operating environment. And we also wanted, we didn't want to buy the properties. That wasn't what we wanted to do. There's a lot of properties. Dev said we need to go out and find new. We wanted to add inventory to the world. And that's what we've concentrated on.
Appreciate the comments on that and want to dive into some of these projects more specifically here in a moment. But I want to stop on capital structure for a moment. Talk to us about the current shares outstanding at the company, Speak to the approximate cash on hand at this point, and then, if you would, the major shareholders on the roster.
Well, we have a little over 3 million in cash. Our market cap's, I think it's a little over 18 million. Shares outstanding, pretty close to 48 million. Approximately 64,500,000 fully diluted. Well, obviously, Dev is a major shareholder. I don't have everybody in my mind. These people are available in our annual report. Dev holds a lot. There's several of us that hold a percent or so.
And with this moving from capital structure, I want to ask a little bit about some of the key people and staff at the company that are supporting you. Talk about some of those folks and, of course, how they're helping you on exploration activities towards that hopefully discovery success.
When Dev first talked to me, he said, John, I need you to be our geologist, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, Dev, I have no interest in drawing a paycheck. I have no interest in applying for vacation or filling out a timesheet. I don't want to be employed, so to speak. I said, I don't mind being busy. I just don't want to get involved in the bureaucracy. And he said, okay, then you need to find me a geologist. And I said, oh man, they're all busy. We're in an upcycle right now. Well, I called around a little bit and I remembered a geologist that worked for Dave Miller's group, part of Strathmore, up in Riverton. And I know he remained in Riverton. I called him and we talked a little bit, and he said, yeah, he'd be interested in doing it. And I talked to some friends up there, and they said, yeah, he's done a good job. Anyway, we were fortunate enough to hire Terrence Osier. He's our vice president of exploration. He started working with Strathmore back in, I think it was around 2003 or 2004. He stayed in Riverton, knows the properties, knows the area, and he's a very good geologist. So Terrence is our VP. The other support folks that obviously we hire drillers and loggers, we hire surveyors, things like that. But my other support, I call him Mr. Uranium, and that's Dev. And he supports the industry. He supports what we're doing. He supports our thoughts in the thing. And that is a big deal to have your CEO behind you. He has our backs on projects. He understands what we're doing. Jamie Bannerman, our corporate development vice president, Ryan Chang. We have good people. We have a lot of others. I don't want to go through everybody, but Jordan Potts, Jeremy Palmier, we've just got a really good, solid bunch of people. I'm very happy with them.
John, thank you for that. Appreciate it. It's always good to know some of the other people that are involved there. And I'd like to get into the agate project to start, Shirley Basin area of Wyoming, of course. Talk about this project, John. What carries your interest here specifically, as far as exploration targets that you've determined, how you're seeing things on the ground there? And then, of course, what is the work that is planned here exploring this project during 2024? As it's my understanding that this project is the main focus for the company.
The agate property is located just west of the highway where I worked for 10 years and mined 20 plus million pounds. I knew it was over there. It was one of my targets when Dev says you got to come up with some properties. It was on my list. I used to watch Kerr McGee drill over there. We had properties at the north end, Utah, and Pathfinder, and Kerr McGee had most of it. And I was friends with the geologist there. I saw the cuttings. They wouldn't let me really look at them, but I'd go over on weekends and stuff. I knew there was something there that wasn't all taken. I said, Terrence, this is what we need to do. And Terrence found that there was open land. And I said, boy, that's pretty far south. He said, yeah, but I said, we both agreed. Get the land. We went down to Terrence went to the University of Wyoming, looked at the records down there. He says, "My gosh, John, there's 600 Kerr-McGee drill holes that are available to look at." Well, we got 1,000 acres of land with drilling. Now we have to verify this, and we're working on that. But we knew there was something out there, and turns out there is something. Terrence drilled, what was it? I forget how many holes last year. 100 holes last year, and hit mineralization on 93% of them. And not only that, but it's very shallow. It's less than 150 feet deep. Looks ideal for ISR application. Of course, our neighbors right across the road, UR Energy, and John Cash has been wonderful to talk with and work with. They are very good at ISR recovery and planning. That's their specialty. They've got all of the old properties on the east side. We've now got this quote mineralization body on the west side of the highway, and they just announced that they are going to do a build out for their ISR plant in Shirley Basin, right across the highway. So that cuts the capital investment for us. It cuts the time frame for permitting. It just gives us the economic and environmental incentive to take this forward. Where else are you going to find a significant mineralized zone suitable for ISR that's approximately 120 feet deep? And we know the stratigraphy, the hydrology, everything becomes simpler. So agate was a target initially for me. The next proper, well, I'm not doing them in order. The very first one that we targeted was Beaver Rim, but I'll cover that in a minute. Well, when Terrence was out doing the agate work, a light bulb went off, and I said, "What about this property I used to go to? It's outside the basin, but it's very close." That was Night Owl. And I got to know the old gentleman that owned it. In fact, he invited me up for a steak dinner one night around the campfire. I got to know him because I showed him how to get to his property with a drill rig. He knew where the property was, but didn't know how to get a rig there. And of course, we had an agreement with the rancher that borders his property. I took him up, got him drilling, and over a period of a few months, got to know him a little bit. Anyway, that the family had dropped the claims in the mid 80s. We picked them up. They had originally mined like 100 tons at about 0.24 grade up there. And I didn't know that until Terrence went into the records. We went out, found mineralization as high as 3,800s on the surface. We did a little drilling last year. Unfortunately, we did not find what we had hoped to find. We didn't go the right direction, evidently, but we did find the oxidized, mineralized channel. So we're optimistic, but agate is such a good target right now. We will probably pursue Night Owl as a sideline to agate. Now, and it's not in the typical basin sediments. I need to add that. It's in a limestone. And the limestone is way older than the Shirley Basin Eocene deposits. Night Owl is an anomalous type Wyoming uranium property. My first target was Beaver Rim, and I had been the chief geologist, director of technical services out there back in the early 80s. We had also acquired some of this land when I was with Strathmore, and Terrence was with Strathmore. And we had done a couple of holes up there, and we had found stacked roll fronts up on Beaver Rim. So obviously, this was a real target for us, and it's going to be one of our areas that we concentrate on this year. It's a little deeper, but I mentioned that underground that I was in that we had installed just off of Beaver Rim. So just adjacent to us lies at least 48, 50 million pounds of unmined uranium mineralization. We know that the mineralizing solutions moved through Beaver Rim. That's how it got into the gas hills. So we're optimistic. We're excited about it. We've got 50 holes planned up there this year. We're hoping that we'll have good weather. We had bad weather last year. The roads were all washed out. We have a sage grouse issue. We can't drill until later in the year there. We have to have the sage grouse out of the way before we do any activities. And I guess I should tell you what our plan is on agate. We have 200 holes planned uh, for this summer season, approximately 30,000 feet. We have 50 holes and 50,000 feet of drilling planned for Beaver Rim. And at night owl, we're going to do some geochemical type work. We'll run out of drilling weather by the end of the year there.
Good information and background on these projects. Just a few follow-ups. So let's stay on agate for a moment. Obviously, this ties in here because you mentioned UR Energy, and of course, the company back in 2023 announced an agreement with UR Energy basically to explore cooperation in the future on potential work together on projects that Strathmore Plus has. Talk about that from the sense that this is that the plan, should you guys be successful at agate, that you would just utilize that relationship to process material with UR Energy and basically fast track the agate project.
That's our intent right now. And, we have a confidentiality agreement with those folks out there. We have toured their Red Desert property, and I'm just going to give a little free publicity. They know what they're doing. They have a nice plant, well designed. Pretty hard to find fault with trying to get their excess capacity in Shirley Basin. It makes the permitting so much easier. It almost works miracles for the agate project. It becomes much easier to permit. Obviously, they've done engineering on this, they've done design work, they've done the permitting. It doesn't take a genius to figure out you'll probably cut your permitting time. You still got to do the baseline studies. You've got to do the hydrology work. It's something you have to do, but we are very hopeful that we'll be able to work with UR Energy.
Very well. And with the other, with Beaver Rim and Night Owl, John, is it just based on your experience of these projects as well, the mineralization you guys are targeting on these projects, is it your understanding that everything there as far as potential discovery of deposits would be ISR amenable?
Beaver Rim should be ISR recoverable. I worked out there for like 8 years or so. My company that I was with before taking that job was the biggest producer in the gas hills. I did a lot of work between the two different mine sites. The materials are there. The engineering should be favorable. I don't see any reason that we shouldn't have an ISR recoverable project up there. Night Owl is not ISR recoverable. And that's why it just hit me one day that, with UR Energy down 7 miles away, I knew the old shops were there, still there. They still have their permit for the tailings. We had a place that we could do a heap leach operation that was partially permitted, and we had a place to put the waste material, because even if you do a heap leach, you still have a tail left, and that is one of the big concerns. The environmental impact, the public perception. These tails are tough to deal with, but they have a facility there. It is licensed to accept. They'll have to do an amendment, but we've already talked with them. This is doable. We could put a heap leach inside of one of the buildings, so we do away with the blowing uh, mineral or sand issue. We do away with the issue of the spray or the infiltrating liquids escaping the pile. It worked, and we had talks with John on this. But like I said, when we did the agate, the light bulb went off. That's the one we needed to pursue. It didn't have any other issues.
John, that sounds good. I appreciate the comments on that, and not off the table that a conventional project could potentially have some type of pathway to production. So I appreciate the comments on that, and looking forward to seeing these projects continue to advance out here, and especially in 2024 with more results. John, one of the other things that's interesting here is, Wyoming in general, arguably the best jurisdiction in the U.S. for uranium. A few others that are good as well, but just the peer comparison, John. There's a number of companies in Wyoming. I can think of about at least four right now that are peer companies who profess to be focused on Wyoming uranium exploration. Talk about what competitive advantages you guys have at Strathmore Plus that really puts you ahead of that pack of peer companies.
Well, unfortunately, I have to become a little egotistical in this, but three of the things that we have, and this is it's kind of an esoteric way to describe it, but we have Dev, Terrence, and myself, and our knowledge of the industry and uranium. Now, I have 50 plus years in it. Terrence has, I think, over 20 years, and Dev's been doing this for, geez, I don't know how long. And then we have the knowledge that because of these years of experience, the knowledge of Wyoming, the knowledge of the ore bodies, we have the history. Like I said, I don't know anybody else that's excavated through an ISR property and talked with the guys that actually produced it in the 60s. So that's another big issue. Biggest issue we have is the knowledge of Wyoming and the permitting. I've gone through permitting on a conventional, an underground, ISR. We have a knowledge of permitting. Not that the others don't. There's nobody better than the folks across the road at UR Energy. They have done it. They are doing it. If I was to say who do I want to play with, I want to go with people that have the experience and the knowledge of the area.
Good to point out some of those differences, and I'll let the audience dig into some of the peer comparisons there. And human resources is a big deal. Wisdom transfer, talent generation, incredibly important in this sector, and it's extra bad in this sector, and it's also bad just in the natural resource sector broadly, as you well know, John. And we've got a serious shortfall of good, competent people across many technical industries, and it's a big problem, and nobody is really talking about it yet. It's a huge problem going forward here. So really appreciate the comments on that and some of the advantages. John, one of the other things wanted to bring up here as well, some recent news that the company has decided, or at least is exploring, a downgrade of their listing from the TSXV to the CSE. Talk about some of the reasoning behind that move, and does it make sense when looking at the benefits and the negative impact of doing this now at this stage in the cycle? Obviously, with the expectation that there would hopefully be some success at the company in the future that would allow future upgrades.
Well, this was I don't want to say a contested discussion, but a discussion that we had. And I can't say everybody thought it was the best or the wisest. However, we needed to look at the ability to do things faster, uh, cheaper, and in our aspect, better by changing. Now, we have not done it yet. It's in consideration. I think it's a good move. It's easier to work. I don't want to just put names out there and stuff, but it has to be easy to get things done. And we just felt that that opportunity was available to us and would be a good choice to make. Like I said, we're not done exploring everything yet. Hasn't been totally accomplished. Uh, when it takes so long to do certain aspects, you do have to look at changes. And to be honest with you have to look at it in a broader aspect of the world. You have to be able to get things done to the advantage of you and your company. Like I said, there's a lot of naysayers about this. We think it's a good idea at this time.
John, always good to get the different insights. We understand a lot of the reasoning for it. We understand maybe some of the negatives as well. We understand that the TSXV is can be quite difficult to deal with at times, and we've seen that increasingly. And I guess I'll just stop on this issue, and we beat this to death a little bit already, but it's not the first time we've seen companies do this, and it's becoming certainly there is a substantial amount of more CSE related listings and CSE related transfers than we have seen over when we first started in this. So we've seen this more frequently. We've also seen it start here and then continue to progress as the company valuation progresses and success hopefully happens. Two sides of this, and we see the benefits and negatives on both sides of that. So appreciate your comments there. Coming back to human resources, and we like to ask all of our guests, but talk about community work, John, at the company, the use of local service providers in Wyoming, community education on proper energy and responsible mining. Just any thoughts on that and maybe any efforts the company is doing.
Well, we don't have a formalized education system with the public in Wyoming. When we get into the pre-production phase, this will be part of it. When we were running Roca Honda, we had lots of public meetings. We had lots of, I guess you'd have to call them educational opportunities with the public. And these things are necessary. Uh, it's probably even harder to find somebody in the public that knows what you're talking about than it is to find a good geologist or an engineer or an environmental person. Uh, I'm a firm believer. If you recall, when I told you about my first night and my first workings, I couldn't find anybody that knew anything about uranium in the pit, and they were digging this. I started an education permit or a program for the miners. I would bring them into my office, new ones especially, even the older ones, and show them how it became a roll front, how we interpreted. They used to put stakes out that from 0 to 2 feet deep below you, you would hit ore, and they had flags out. Nobody even knew what the flags meant. Education is the key to success in almost any industry. I don't care if you're talking Strathmore Exploration or General Motors. Education and education of the public, very important.
It's always good to get that, and I think it's always good for companies to make an effort to assist with, not only utilization of local service providers, but education on energy, real energy, quality of energy, and also responsible mining activities. And as you well know, our government bureaucrats also we're finding that their expertise levels are dropping and that they also need to understand better and get more familiar with these industries and understand why they're so important. Well, John, I think we covered quite a bit here on an introduction. Really appreciate that. Good introduction chat here. Why don't we leave it here for now? And of course, any final comments you have. But let me leave you with this question. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 19 million Canadian dollars. Why should Strathmore Plus Uranium be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors portfolio at this stage?
Well, boy, that's quite a question there. I would look at it as one of the ways I could make money. I look at Strathmore and I see a company that didn't buy their claims, they found them, they staked them fresh. We didn't buy them. We are very lean and mean. And when you look at like agate, for instance, my gosh, it's 120 feet deep. Material is suitable for ISR in a great permitting jurisdiction. I have to be careful what I say here. I wouldn't want to tell anybody to go out and buy Strathmore, but I'll tell you what, to me, it looks like a heck of an opportunity.
John, thank you for that, and the potential that a small company could provide to investors that want to speculate on uranium price, and of course, it's company specific success. So, and the best way, John, if you will, for folks to reach out to the company, where would you send them?
Well, obviously going to our website is a good opportunity, and you don't have to know the exact listing. You don't have to know the exact website address. You can just Google Strathmore. And to me, that's the way that most of my friends find out about it. They just put in Strathmore into Google. And you know what? There's lots of good articles on there. You get to see all of our friendly faces, the presentations that we give, the information. It's all in there. That would be the one thing. And this one's almost tied with it because it's very closely related. Programs like yours and other people that do these kind of podcasts, my gosh, we didn't have this ability when I was younger. People can hear somebody talk about this thing. They can call me up. They can see who we are. Your type of podcast, and not just yours. I don't want to do that to others. These things are great tools. You can actually hear from the people that are out there. What a great way to find out where you want to invest your money.
John, thank you for that. You're too kind. Of course, our podcast, as we always hold out to be, that it is very low level due diligence for our audience, just to make sure that they understand that and that they should do their own. John, well, look, I really appreciate the time here. Great to have this introduction chat, and best of luck at Strathmore Plus. Thank you.
Well, Andrew, thank you.